Now, in this slide, in this picture, you can basically see the features of the primary and the secondary groups. Just pay attention to the primary group features. There is total personality involvement. You know people very well. You are really involved in the primary group's activities. In addition to that, there is emotional warmth, right? You are much closer emotionally to the people in your primary group. There is some room for spontaneity. You may act randomly and people will not really condemn you for that because they know you well. And if you do something silly, they might say, well, don't bother, I know you very well. I mean, if you do something silly, you wouldn't, immediately, change my opinion of you, right? Because these people are members of your primary group. But if you do something really silly in the secondary group, people might think, well, this person is really inadequate, so I'd rather stay away from this person, right? Because there is this emotional warmth. There is no room for spontaneity. You must be following some very rigidly held norms and rules of conduct. Other features of the primary group, they are smaller in size and they're valued as an ant. Looking at the features of the secondary group, you'll see quite the opposite, such as there is segmented personality involvement, so you don't really, if you free ride, if you don't do something for the benefit of that secondary group, probably nobody will really notice it, right? But if you free ride in a very small primary group, your free riding would become immediately noticeable, and people will really condemn you for that, which isn't really the case if you're a member of a big, secondary group, where there is no face-to-face contact, where there is no emotional warmth. Actually, there is emotional coolness, all right? People just say hi to each other if they see each other in the morning, for instance, if they are working for some company, right? And that would be all. Okay, they would know each other by their appearance, but they wouldn't be really familiar with this person's background, preferences, and so on and so forth. But when you are coming to your department in that company, you would probably say more than just hello to the people, with whom you work, shoulder to shoulder every day. You would probably ask how they're feeling today, what they did yesterday. I mean, there is much more room for face-to-face interaction with the people of the primary group. Other features of the secondary group are they're larger in size, which I mentioned. There is much formality. Secondary groups are much more formal, right? And it is expected that the members of the secondary groups will have only professional relationships with each other. But the members of the primary groups, the interaction between them is much more informalized. All right, so now let's look at other very two important concepts in sociology in relation to social groups, and these are the reference groups and the group conformity. Any group that a person takes into account when evaluating his or her actions or characteristics is called as a reference group. A person likely to have a number of reference groups. For example, a reference group for some fresher student at KIMAP would be the KIMAP student community. All right, in other words, a fresher student who has just enrolled to KIMAP in the first year, in the first semester, he or she will try to really simulate the behavior, the ways of thinking, the lifestyle, the ways of behaving, of the larger KIMAP student community. Because he or she aspires to become a typical member of the KIMAP student community. So this process, and this process is called as socialization. Through the process of socialization, this fresher student will try to learn what it means to be a KIMAP student. As a result of learning what it means to be a KIMAP student, it is proven that a KIMAP student, a typical KIMAP student, is the reference group, is the reference identity for this fresher student. In other words, he or she tries to become, a typical KIMAP student by copying, by simulating the behavior of, a larger KIMAP student community. Or another example of this would be, let's say, as a second or third year student while studying at KIMAP, you have decided for yourself that upon graduation you want to become, you want to work for one of the big four companies. You want to be a professional accountant, a professional manager or whatever, right? So you would know that upon graduation you will actually apply to one of these big four companies. Probably you've heard what are the typical features and characteristics of the people who work in one of these big four companies. You know that they're really workaholic. You know that they really dress very well. You know that they are really professional. You know they have that, you know that they are really career oriented, right? In addition to that, you would know that they are extremely good in their work, in their job, and extremely good in their, specialization. So knowing this, you will, during your studies at KeyMap, try to aspire, you will try to study, you will try to act the way that your reference group members would normally act. So you would try to really, study hard, you would really try to work hard, because you know that this is exactly the way how the people working for the Big Four companies act. All right, so in that sense, they represent your reference group. Speaking of group conformity, now this is very simple. Individual behavior is influenced by the groups to which one belongs and the groups to which one aspires to belong. So when you come to KeyMap, usually you would try to act just like everyone else. In other words, you would try to conform to the norms and rules of conduct of a typical KeyMap student. However, if you choose not to conform to these norms and values, KeyMap students will immediately identify that you are doing something wrong. Some of your friends, your classmates, probably your instructors, your tutors, they might say, look, Saulia, you shouldn't be really, acting this way at KeyMap. You shouldn't be really coming late at KeyMap because this is not acceptable. Let's say you are a transfer student who used to study at some state university in Kazakhstan, or let's not discriminate, at some other university of Kazakhstan, where bribery was such a norm that when you come to KeyMap, after you've transferred to KeyMap, you would think, well, I'm doing so badly on accounting. Maybe I should just, go and offer some present, some gift to my faculty, to my professor, because I used to do this in the past. But would you really do that? I think that if you do this, you would be immediately punished for that, because this is not norm. This is not the case at KeyMap. So in other words, you would try to conform to how things are at KeyMap. You will be socialized, you will be controlled by the various social control agents at KeyMap who would tell you that, look, Saulia, probably this was okay in the university where you're coming from, but look, at KeyMap, this is not the case. You shouldn't be coming late to class, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be bribing your professor because you will be immediately punished for that. So you see, you will try to conform to the KeyMap norms and values. Because if you want to be accepted by the KeyMap student community, you would have to really be like any other student in the KeyMap student community.